And if we go, can I just put it on presentation mode for a minute?
What you're about Slido. I've got Slido. Wait.
Yeah.
So why is my... Oh, okay, so my screen is Slido.
Yes, your screen is
That is...
22212.
Now, I still need to log into another screen.
The resolution is fantastic. Yeah, I'm good. Resolution's good. So this one is that screen.
Are you going to be able to doing it?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just checking the resolution.
Okay.
That's all I was checking.
We're good.
Guess we'll know
so
next
this is Slido.
Yeah, so the problem... so, I'm trying to think of how... I might ask this gentleman. So, Paul DFO, why are you calling me now? Yes, Clancy. Yeah, okay, bye. Bye. Of course. Okay. I need Slido. Okay, so usually Slido would be on this, like the desktop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
no,
not
it's
this
not going
one.
to happen.
So Team Talk on
So Team Talk. So
Slido.
okay. So switcher. I still
Okay.
probably need to log into your computer.
I don't know. Is that? I think this is Alex. Is that the
Yeah.
the live stream is live right now? David knows he was straight earlier. Tim was wondering.
So you only just do the first 3 slides. To the slide.
Sorry, I'm just so sorry. Okay.
Nicholas. And then
Who? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me at the back there? Yep, well done. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November Team Talk. I'll be your host for this morning. And we have an action-packed agenda today to cover quite a few subjects. So before we get started, just check that everything's going okay. So we'll start with acknowledgement of country. This morning I'd like to acknowledge the Bidjigal people that are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are present here today. So we have a packed agenda today. Nicholas Lush is going to talk a little bit about the work that's happening in the cyber team today on cyber awareness, which is an area that's we're getting quite a bit of positive feedback about at the moment. And of course, if you've been reading the press, you'll know that it's an area of focus for both the government and the university at the moment. I'm going to do a bit of a Q&A about the shape of New South Wales UNSW IT. We've had some discussions as part of the strategy, and I want to talk a little bit about how we see the future, how we see ourselves getting organised in the future. And there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but of course Slido is open now. So if you'd like to open it up on your phones, and the event code today is IT 18th of November. So please post any questions you may have, and I'm sure you have a few. So without any ado, I'll introduce you to Nick Lush. Welcome, Nick. Thank you.
All right, so good morning, everybody. Hope you can all hear me all right. As Tim mentioned, I'm here to talk about cybersecurity. So you would have heard quite a bit about cybersecurity of late. Most of the IT team talks we've presented in one way or another. The main reason is the cybersecurity team do a lot of hard work behind the scenes. There's a lot of controls in place to protect the university and yourselves against cyber attacks. But the last line of defence are staff. So I'll be talking today about what a real threat looks like and how to counter that threat. All right, so I'm going to walk you through a recent breach that's occurred at UNSW. So the first alarming thing is that 63 staff members have recently been attacked by cyber criminals over a 3-day period at the end of last month, the beginning of this month. The good news is that there were 69 tickets raised within those 43 staff. The reason why there are so many tickets raised with Service Centre about the attacks is because it wasn't just one attack for each staff member, there was multiple attacks. So it's a really good take-home that people are doing the right things and reporting these attacks to the Service Centre. A bit more detail about it, and I'll go into this in further slides, but 17 staff disclosed their ZIDs and passwords to the attackers, unfortunately. And of those 17 staff, 11 went on to disclose personal details, so such things as first name, last name, mobile numbers. And the other thing that the attackers did was they managed to impersonate staff members by ringing up the service centre, and they managed to do this by impersonate 3 different staff members. And just a call out here is that the service centre did follow due diligence, and they did follow the right procedures. And again, I'll talk about this a bit more in later slides. All right, so how did this happen? So first of all, the attackers got hold of these 43 staff members' email addresses and mobile phones as well. Mobile phone numbers. So it's quite easy for attackers to get hold of this information. It can be through legal means by trolling through the internet or websites. People's phone numbers and email addresses are out there through various means, and they can also do it illegally as well. There's illegal sites that attackers can leverage to obtain your email addresses and mobile phone numbers. So what happened next? Once the attackers have the email addresses and phone numbers, they can start implementing attacks quite easily. So there were 3 different methods they used. So the first one was via email. So you may have heard the term phishing. Phishing is simply just a way to impersonate somebody else to obtain information from them via email, typically. And this was quite a sophisticated attack. This is what it looked like. And again, I'll go into a bit more detail on how you can identify if it is why it is an attack, not a legitimate email, in further slides. And the other thing was the staff members also received, I think there were 33 of them received SMS as well. So along with the email, they also received an SMS. So again, it makes it feel a lot more legitimate as well. And as I mentioned before, the service centre were called 3 times by attackers, and they impersonated the staff members. And again, the service centre followed their due diligence. All right, so let's have a look a bit more closely about phishing, or so the emails that people receive, and how to tell if this is an attack or not. So the first thing that we suggest you do is always look at the email address from the sender. So in this case, you'll see with the cross next to it, it's at everything of the domain name after the @ is staff-unsw.com.au. So even if you're a new staff member and you're not really savvy about what your email address looks like, you can simply check your email address. So if it is from internal communication, such as this one, or making out to be, always check the domain name. So like I said, you can just compare this against your own email address. So it's just a very simple thing you can do in the first instance. The other thing, again, within the email that you can do is be wary of the email creating a sense of urgency. So if you do receive something like this one and the subject matter says reminder, have a think back. Have you actually received a communication from this person or this, what it makes out to be before? So it's just one simple thing you can look at. The other thing is look at poor grammar. And again, the sense of urgency. So in this case, I'm not sure how clear it is up there, but you can see, do not forget to action this before COB. I'm hoping that an official communications wouldn't put abbreviations in like this. So again, this was a very sophisticated attack. Some are very obvious. The grammar is very poor. So again, look out for that. And again, the sense of urgency, saying this Friday, they're not being specific about date, so it's quite broad. This Friday could be used anytime. All right, and lastly, the link within the email. And this is what attackers are really, in this case, we're really trying to get the staff members to lure them into pressing. So links can be abbreviated within the email. So there are ways to check the links. So you can, if you're looking at, again, what the link looks like, so in this case, it's the URL finishes with unsw.com.au. So again, you compare this to the UNSW sites, and again, it should be unsw.edu.au. You can take these learnings with you as well if you're attacked, not just within the university, but via your personal email address. You may have experience of receiving similar type of things from attacker pretending to be your or one of the banks or your insurance company. Always check the official website, and again, you can make sure that the URL that they're coming from, or the link they're trying to direct you to, is actually a legitimate link. Best practice though, you should never press a link within an email that's directing you. Always access it via the university's website, or like I mentioned, if it's a bank trying to lure you into this, always go via your internet banking. All right, so again, very similar. This is the SMS that people are receiving, as I showed you before. And again, they're trying to get you to select, press on a link. And again, you can do the same thing that I just went through with the URL. It is a much harder on a mobile device, whether it's an email or a text message, to actually see the link, because again, it can be, it's just smaller to see. So there are ways you can actually see the full link's name if it is an abbreviated version, depending what sort of device you have, but you can hover your finger over the link to see the properties of it. All right, so for those staff members who actually did lured into pressing this link, this is what they saw. So they were asking for the attackers were asking for their ZID and password. Once the ZID and password were entered in, they had that information. So again, it just was simply by having someone's email address, and then they can obtain their login details, and then the world is at their fingertips what they can do with that. All right, so attackers revealed. So luckily in this case, this was a simulated attack, so not a real attack. It's something that the UNSW cybersecurity team will be doing every now and then. They're not doing it to trick people. They are doing it to test controls and see what changes they need to put in to protect yourselves against cyber attacks. The important thing to take home as well is, don't think that if an attack comes through, it is going to be the cybersecurity team. These attacks do happen. So again, this was a very sophisticated one in that it looked very legitimate, but hopefully today you can take away some of those learnings to be able to identify an attack. So again, when you receive a suspicious email or text message, the most important thing to do is report it to the service centre. So if it is an urgent thing, so if you actually pressed on the link and you feel like you have shared some of this information, make sure that you call the service centre straight away. You can use the report fish button as well, that should be on your Outlook 365 to easily report an email. Again, if it's urgent, the best thing to do is call the service centre. All right, that's all I had today. Hopefully that was helpful. There is online training that everyone within IT should have gone through earlier this year. If you have not gone through that, feel free to reach out to myself or the cybersecurity team, and we'll make sure that you can go through some of that training. And it will be a continuous thing as well. So at least once a year, more likely twice a year, we'll be pushing out training, because these type of attacks do become more sophisticated, and we always have to be alert to how to avoid these type of attacks. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Quite a lot to think about there, and quite a lot of questions coming up as well, so you have to join me here in a minute. Okay. So, today's presentation is really just to talk a little bit about the future of IT. For many of you, you'll know we've been in discussions. We've had multiple presentations on the domain model, and we've been in discussions about how IT might be shaped by the new strategy. And today we're just here to talk a little bit about that, to talk about how we got here, the current structure, how we've been working, a bit about how the strategy shapes the organisation, in turn, both the internal and external factors. A little bit about how that's going to affect us in 2020. So as we move, it's not a long. 2020 is not a long time away, particularly given the Christmas break. So preparing for 2020, and a little bit about how the strategy shapes our approach to technology deployment and the way we're going to work in the future. So I want to start with a little bit about the journey over the last 4 years. So one of the things I think that was interesting for me when I arrived in the organisation was just how many strategic reviews have gone on in the last few years and how little strategic change has happened as a result of that. If we go back all the way back to 2015, the first campus master plan, there was the PwC change as part of 2025 and operational efficiency, and then we've had a number of iterations around Deloitte and other external reviews. There's been underpinning that has been a constant thread of changing direction, but not a lot of action on that changing of direction. And the changing nature of the leadership team has also meant that there hasn't been a lot of progress in this area. Some things are still open. So in particular, the 217 proposal to outsource was never really closed down. So that's something we're in the process of closing down right now. So there's no desire to massively outsource the IT function within UNSW. And in fact, in many ways, the opposite's true. So we're in the final stages of closing out the strategy at the moment. I'll talk to a bit about that a bit later. And it doesn't mean that we don't have to change, because we absolutely have to change. The strategy requires us to think and work differently than we have done in the past. But what we'll talk about is a different way of making that change. We're also not immune from the environment in which the university finds itself as well. So for those of you who are aware, like most universities, the University of New South Wales is experiencing a bit of downturn in overseas student numbers, and that's having an impact on the financial position as well. So we're not immune to some of those changes that may come through from other parts of the organisation. So there's been a lot of consultation to create this strategy. It's been broad and deep. We've consulted internally in the IT team. We've consulted a lot with the professional teams. We've consulted a lot with the academic teams, and for the first time in preparing some of the strategies we've done, we've had a deep engagement with the student community as well. And you'll see that coming through very strongly in the strategic plan. There's been a lot more rigour around this process. We've looked at the whole of the technology environment, not just focused on digital. We've looked at the assets that we've got and how we want to operate and run in the future. So as you can see, there's sort of 4 key themes there. And then there's a set of enabling technologies. The key themes are in blue. The different shades of blue doesn't really mean anything at this point in time. And then the IT organisation and services are in grey. Student and campus engagement is really the focus of improving the student experience. Learning and teaching is about how we deliver teaching and how we support our academic staff. Research is all about how we get more productive in the research space, and the enabling services are the underlying tech that supports the whole organisation, HR, finance, those functions. And then within the IT organisation, there's a real focus on how we respond to those challenges. So to those strategic needs, we align a key response area. So student and campus engagement is all about a student-centric experience. And that just isn't about how you log into Moodle every morning. That's also about how you interact across the faculties and the schools. It's also about how you might plan your course. It's also about when you also considering what you need to do when you might have to lodge a travel request or make a travel expense claim. Exemplary education and career pathways is all about online, real-time, insights-driven learning. We want to support the academics as well as supporting the teachers. We want to make it easy to teach, easy to prepare, as well as easy to learn. So a real focus there, not just on the student experience, but also making sure our academics have the tools and support to deliver, and also to start, as an organisation, to start considering some of the emerging challenges in our sector, like short courses, online only students, micro-credentialing, lifelong learning. They're all things that feed into that strategy, and they're all things that university is thinking about at the moment. So rich research ecosystem. Research has really been at the centre of what the university's done over the last few years, and there's a real focus on continuing to use research as a mechanism to improve our rankings, and there's a lot for us to do in terms of improving the way researchers interact with the technology, and there's a real concern across the university about how data-intensive research is becoming, and that's something where the university is really asking us to support them going forward in terms of considering how we manage our information for research going forward. And lastly, enable our people is a focus really on making sure that our the people in the organisation, whether they're academics, whether they're professional staff, whether they're students, have the best tools to make them efficient. There's a recognition that the internal systems, which are ageing, the finance systems and the HR systems, don't really support the mission of the organisation. They're complex, they're difficult to use, there's not a lot of automation, and particularly in the academic space, there's a view that actually they're increasingly spending more time doing administration and less time teaching and doing research. And that's something we really need to focus on. And then there's the IT organisation elements we need to think about. There's thinking about the capabilities that we need to have internally to deliver on the UNSW IT strategy. We need to focus on investment in platforms, we need to focus on the enablers, get our architecture right, and get our delivery models right. Digital cloud platform, digital and cloud enable us to be more agile, to adopt new systems and ways of working, and to secure the delivery of applications in a way we're unable to do that at the moment. And data and analytics and insight driven, we need to be better at using the information we collect to make better decisions for the university, or to support better outcomes for students. And that's an area where we've got a fair amount of work to do. So where's the strategy at? So we've agreed the strategy with the Steerco at the moment, so there's a Steerco that oversights it. We were supposed to be at management board this week, but it's going to go to next week, and hopefully the council in December. On the back of the work we've done to date, we have been allocated more more project funding into next year, and obviously we are one of the few, if not the only, part of the university which has been provided with additional project funding for next year. So there's a real level of accountability now there for us to deliver on our expectations. But we are also going to be impacted by the university financial situation as well. So there's some things we have to do to respond to the situation the university finds itself in financially at the moment. So what do we aspire to be? So it's interesting when we go and talk to the faculties and divisions, is actually they want someone to help them solve their technology problems. They want us to partner with them. They want that relationship to be persistent. They want it to be value added, and they want us to be working with them to help them solve the challenges they have. So they want us to be thought leaders. They want us to partner. They want our services to be efficient and reliable. There's still some concerns about the reliability of those systems, and there's still some concerns with the pressure on the university at the moment about how efficient we are in delivering those services. But there's a recognition that we need to invest in enabling technologies that make the university more efficient. And they want us to deliver an environment that's simpler. It's too complex now. It's too hard to work out how I get things done, and there's too many choices. So what we need to do on the back of that is we need to make UNSW a great place to work. We need some certainty in what we're doing, but we need to get the basics right. We need to build the foundation for the future so that we've got, as we move forward, we've got a set of underlying tenets and the way we work or the way we operate that underpin that. We need to take an iterative approach, okay? No big bang, no big outsourcing deals. We're just going to, over time, we're just going to start to change the way we work, embed new ways of working, bring new capabilities on board, and start to build a sustainable organisation going forward. We need strong portfolio planning. So what we have been given extra funding in next year, and that is something we have to make sure we use. But it's not just getting close enough. We've got to make sure that we use all the resources we're allocated to move the university forward. We need to make sure we're using new techniques in terms of how we plan the portfolio, like over-programming, making sure we take a phased approach to delivery, making sure we've got a resourcing model that flexes up and down based on the volume of work we've got. planned. So there are, I know that we've talked about the guiding principles before, but you can see here that I've highlighted in red those principles that are going to affect us as an organisation the most. And what that calls out is we're going to work in a different way, and we need to develop and grow new skills. So we need to be much better. If you start at let's say we start at the sort of 6 o'clock perspective and work our way around for some bizarre reason, we'll start there. Leverage the innovation of vendors. So we've had a lot of we haven't really used the market very well to improve our ability to deliver, to flex up and down, and to use skills in the market. I mean, we won't be experts in everything, and we need to recognise that. So leveraging the vendor environment is important. Adopt and adapt. So there are challenges in the university that everybody wants to be very, very different, and they want us to customise and modify those systems. So we want to move to an environment where we adopt those capabilities and we adapt them. We don't modify, heavily change, or enhance. Cloud and as a service first. Cloud is undoubtedly the way we have to work in the future. Okay? If there are now applications and services that we cannot purchase as on-prem. So we have to move to cloud. We can deliver things more efficient. We can get more flex. We just need to do that in a programmed way. And when the start of that, we're now starting to work on our as a service model, and hopefully we'll have someone to lead that shortly. So human-centered experience, embed digital transformation and simple decision-making. We need to improve the way we work across all of these. We need to take we're taking very much a customer-led approach. Part of that is thinking about the experience for our users, understanding how we embed digital in what we do now. So digital isn't something separate, it's something that needs to be embedded in what we do on a day-to-day basis. And we need to simplify the decision-making in our organisation. Empower people to make the right decisions, empower them to make them quickly, and move on to the next item. And actively managing data, as Adam says, this is the one everybody has, but it's really important to us. Data has as an emerging role here. We've tended to think of it as a forecasting thing or a performance managing thing, but increasingly with the adoption of AI and machine learning, it becomes a real-time decision-making tool, and we need to understand how we use those capabilities much more effectively in the future. If you have a look at what some universities are doing in terms of monitoring student performance and almost in real time providing advice or interactions, then there's some real opportunities there for us to become more effective in that space. So we do require some new capabilities moving forward. So I just want to talk a little bit about that. So customer-centric. So we need to really understand that we are providing customer services, and so we have to link ourselves to our customers. Right now, our customer feedback is a lot of change in the IT organisation. I've met 20 people from IT. Half of them seem to have left. I don't really know who to speak to, what's going on. So we need to align ourselves to the way the organisation works. The other challenge is we're perceived as very, very much as generalists in the IT function. So you're great at doing infrastructure and this sort of stuff, but you don't really know a lot about my business. You're not really linked to the people and the problems we have. So we need you to be more connected to what we want. We need to have a long-term working relationship with you, but we really need you to understand what our challenges are and work with us in solving them. And there is a recognition that we need to be working differently. We need to be working more agile. We need to be working, more contemporary models of delivery. And our customers want us to do that. I'm not sure they understand all the ramifications of that, but it's something they recognise. So cloud first is a change for us. We are integrating. As we move to cloud-based models, we become more of an integrator, not in the typical sense of building integration, but actually of making systems from joining other systems together. So there's a real change there in how we think about operating and working in that environment. On top of that, we'll be sourcing those services from the market. So we need to understand about how we go to market, how we contract, and then we manage the performance of those service providers and vendors once we've engaged them. Service management is a critical part of what we do, and I guess there's a real opportunity there for us to improve the way we deliver services. We know that we're impacted quite a bit by the tool set that we've got at the moment, and that's a real focus to try and overcome that challenge next year. But also, we're going to have to work closely with our partners as well. So, if we engage a third-party cloud partner, How do we move tickets across to those guys? How do we manage their performance? How do we support services where it might be a cloud partner passing data to another cloud partner, which is certainly a situation we're going to find ourselves in very shortly. So there's a lot of work there to do, not just on looking at the tool set, but thinking about how we work more effectively in that environment, because there are some real challenges there for us, and we need to be more together than we are at the moment, and we need to make sure that when we look at our partners, we understand where their accountabilities and responsibilities are. Integration is a big part of that. We know that's a bit of a challenge for us, but as we move into the cloud environment and we move to much more of an API-driven environment, it'll become a bigger challenge again. So there's work going on at the moment in terms of defining our integration strategy and tool set going to market, and I think we'll start to move on that very early next year. And personalization is a key function. It comes out particularly strongly in the student space, but also in the employee space as well. But a real focus next year on delivering some more personalization for students, and we're working very closely with the DEX team to make sure we can start to integrate that into some of the products and services. The other challenge we have is that we are being, as I indicated before, we are being pressured to make some savings in our internal staff team as part of this thing, and so we will be looking to ask for a small number of VRs over the next few months just to close that obligation out for this year. It's a small change. Our staff numbers over the next few years will rise slightly, but we have a requirement to provide some savings into next year, so we'll be conducting a small VR process over the next few weeks. I just want to talk about the domain alignment. So we've talked a lot about domains and what they are. So for the clarity of what we're doing at the moment, the domains are really an alignment mechanism to ensure that we engage effectively with our customers and that we can build capability, specialised capability in our teams to meet required business needs. So there's some acronyms up here, so I'll just explain those domains and I'll talk a little bit about the roles of the functions. So STAR is short for Student, Academic and Research. Not everybody's preferred nomenclature, but sort of clear about what it's there. Corporate Services is the corporate systems that we or the corporate environment, so HR, finance, state management, those sorts of shared corporate environments. There's been some debate about what to call that team, but if we call it professional services, when we're actively looking to fill that role, we get a lot of people from PwC and Deloitte and KPMG looking at that. Cyber, I think, is self-evident. We've had a bit of discussion today about the cyber program and how the cyber team and how that works. And then the service delivery operational team that runs the infrastructure and back office environments. And then we've got the enabling services that support those delivery domains. So the strategy and architecture components, the PPMO, and the BITS function, which delivers our risk and procurement capabilities. So what do the domains give us? So they give us a clear end-to-end ownership of delivery with clear accountability for success. So delivery is an important part of these services, and whether you're delivering projects or services, it needs to be clear who's delivering those. Within those functions, we're going to have consistent and dedicated engagement teams. So the engagement to the functions lives within those teams. It's not a separate, homogenous, separate team distributed amongst one or two teams or consolidated into a whole. It's still aligned to the people that we interact on an ongoing basis, either for that particular discipline or for that particular focus of the business. It allows us to specialise internally, which is one thing our customers are really asking us. So we'll have specialisation around engagement on the finance and HR systems in a way we haven't had before. Okay, they'll be linked to those relationship people in those functions, and we'll develop connections out through to our suppliers and business partners through that process as well. The same will occur in the STAR team. We're already setting up a function there that is aligned to the faculties, and we'll develop through that relationships out into the core shared academic and research functions as well. So very much an alignment around the way the business is organised and the key disciplines that underpin the business. also it'll allow us to have that area of specialisation which we just haven't had in the past, and which the business is really crying out for. It also allows us then to within the IT executive, for us to align our support against particular functions of the business. And where we see that starting to happen now is we're getting really positive feedback about how that engagement's improving and how they're getting more value out of what we're doing in IT. And ultimately, we think this will lead to better partnerships with our customers. It'll result in a better customer experience. So there's someone embedded in these teams who now interacts actually with the customer with day-to-day operations that they have. And we think it'll result in better technology outcomes and make it easier for us to deliver solutions into these environments. I think the groupings are really, the other thing that underlies those groupings is really a set of drivers around us being more focused around the technology components that underpin this as well. So we cannot forget that under each one of these, there's a suite of technology assets that we have to monitor and maintain. So this is probably a bit, I don't know if you can see all the lines at the back, you probably can, I'd imagine. So this is a bit more complex, and I won't dwell on this too much, but as you can see here, we've sort of recognised the domains out here in the STAR, corporate services, cyber on your left, and the service function with their service management office and third-party suppliers in there, which deals with the service delivery and operations, strategy and architecture, PPMO and bits down here. So this represents it. The reality is everybody's interacting with everybody in this diagram, and those interactions are effectively bidirectional. So one of the things we need to show is how those interactions occur and how we interoperate as an organisation. The reality is it's not a massive change from what we're doing at the moment, but it is an evolution. And the core focus for us is to evolve, bed that change down, make sure we understand how it's working, and move on to the next improvement in that iterative fashion. So this is the first stage of going through this process. But this is only a small diagram, and our challenge now going forward, and probably will be the challenge for the next few months, is actually working on building out these interactions and making sure we start to build out the relationships that need to exist here as well. Because this is not just about processes, this is also about people working together, understanding their roles and responsibilities, and being clear about how we make these things work effectively. So next steps. So as an executive team, we were all off on site on Friday working through the plans for 2020. So you may remember we did a business plan for next year, and the focus is to create that business plan this year, for the year we're in. And the focus now is to work on creating that business plan so we've got it in place before we start. There's also a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of setting ourselves up to be successful for 2020. Today, obviously, we're just walking through the strategy and the impact of the future of IT. Tomorrow, we've got a 3-hour workshop for the leadership team to work through the operating model with Gartner. So what we've found as we've built the operating model out is we've checked that back with some of our other consulting partners, and we've checked it back with Gartner. And the feedback we're all getting is, yes, this is a contemporary way of organising ourselves as an IT team. Yes, it's the right way to do that. But I think it's actually really important, particularly at the leadership team level, to actually work through that now with an external partner who can help us understand a little bit about, well, what might it take now? What are the things that might be different? How does this model relate to best practice? What are the things we need to be conscious as we go through that? On Wednesday, we're looking to finalise our top-down strategic priorities for 2020, which includes what are the things we need to do as an organisation. Secondly, what does the portfolio of work look like? So there's a lot for us to do next year. As we said, there's additional funding in next year. We've got carryover from this year that we need to keep going, and we need to make sure we're delivering effectively for the first 3 months of next year. We don't really want a bit of a hiatus while we all come back from Christmas and, exchange stories about what a great holiday we have and talk about how much we had to drink and how much we had to eat. We just need to be going from day one. And on Friday we have an LT business planning day where the executive team or the leadership team come together to actually complete that business planning activity for next year as well. So I'm hoping that at the beginning, this time next week, we'll have the shell of the business plan for 2020, and we can talk about the sorts of priorities that we're setting for the organisation, the IT organisation, in terms of improving the way we operate and do things. I think that's it for that presentation. And I think that's it for our presentation today. So I know we've got plenty of things to run on Slido. So I'm going to walk through this. Let's start with uncertainty and slow iterative changes. So the reality is that we have made a decision to iterate the changes for the simple reason that there's a lot of feedback that the 2017 changes and the changes done in 2019 really disrupted the organisation. That doesn't mean iterative change is slow, but it does mean we need to demonstrate what we're doing. We need to build on those changes, and we need to sustain them. The business feeling, that the feedback we get from the business is the large-scale change that was done in 17 and the changes that were proposed in 18 caused IT to be really inward-looking, and we disengaged from the business, and that was the period where service delivery fell behind and where we started to disengage from the organisation. So that's a conscious decision. Iterative change doesn't have to be slow, and I think there's a bit of work for us to do on how fast we can move, but I want to ensure that when we make change, that change sticks and that we can move on to the next change. And there is a probably worth saying. So the language that comes around us getting extra funding for next year is, we're giving you this extra funding, but we're not really comfortable you can make the most out of it, but we'll give it a go, okay? So there's a challenge to us from the organisation, and we can't afford to be massively disrupted by going into a massive change at this point in time. Iterative change doesn't have to be slow, okay? And that'll depend on how fast we think we can go, but we cannot risk going through a massive, disruptive, major change at this point in time, because it will, at the time that we get extra confidence and funding from the business and a lockdown strategy, because it's simply just, nobody has confidence we can do all of those things at once.
Thank you for jumping straight into that, Tim. So thank you, everyone, who submitted your questions. We appreciate everyone committing your voice into this speech and letting us hear what you're actually thinking out here at the front. Now, on to the next question. Here we have, given how much has been promised and how little has been delivered through big consultancy hypotheses, are Deloitte and PwC no longer preferred as main culprits?
I don't know whether that's culprits or partners, so I'll just let me navigate this. Right. So there are two challenges with that statement. So it's easy to blame consultants. You know, you can do a piece of work, you can walk away from it at the end, and you can say, you know what, the consultants did a bad job, and you know we never should have done that piece of work in the first place. So it's a bit of a challenge because in these situations, I think no one's blameless. Okay, so I've worked with Deloitte and PwC before, and there are good people there that give good advice. But if you don't manage them well, or you don't run them well, you don't get good advice. Okay, so it's fair to say the organisation itself is reluctant to use large consulting firms at the moment. It doesn't mean we won't partner them with. We've got Deloitte's doing a small piece of work for us at the moment around mapping out the future roadmap for cyber, for example, and they're doing a good job, but it's a small piece of work. We're all over it. We know that actually whether that's a success or not is down to us in IT, not down to Deloitte, okay? Because they'll run an exercise and they'll walk off into the sunset, and we'll be left holding the baby. So the bottom line is, at the moment we aren't using big consulting practices. That's because I just don't see there's a need for us to do that. And my preference in the sort of work we're doing at the moment is to use very specialised bespoke organisations that have a really specific requirement for us. But there are cases where we will use consulting organisations to deliver those services. I just don't think that we'll be doing a lot of very large programs that require those types of skills in the short to medium term. Okay.
Thank you, Tim. So next we have, how do you propose empowering our people? Most are not allowed to make decisions, and very few have true delegation.
So there are more delegations than you think, actually. So one of the things we've found through the work we're doing at the moment is actually we're not exercising our delegations. So that's the first thing I'd say. So if you've got delegations, you're totally enabled to execute on them. So The great thing about doing a strategy is I don't necessarily have all the answers there, and some of these things are things that we need to work on. But the sort of top-down, control-based way we've had to work in the past is something that we need to change. We can't be an agile organisation that delivers on change unless we're prepared to empower our people to get on and make change and enable it. And so the first stage of that is actually for us to work with the leadership team to build out the capabilities within the leadership team to make sure that between the executive and the leadership team we've got the right ways of working in place. We then need to build that out to support the decision-making process that we need to across the organisation. But my feeling is too many decisions have come up to the centre, to the executive team, and we need to move some of those decision-making things down to technical expertise or to the day-to-day operations people. I think some of this is it affects has had a big impact on our customer service. So if you're there providing a service to someone and you can't make a decision about how to restore that service or how to get them the service they need quickly, then you're not going to be effective. So I don't know exactly how those mechanisms will happen, because in different areas there'll be different responses to those, but it is something we need to work on, and it is something that is a core part of what we're doing in the domain model, and you'll see that. You know, we are empowering people to be at the front line, we're empowering them to engage, and we're empowering them to make decisions. But different situations require us to respond differently. I don't know the answer to the next one, but I'll be finding out.
Thank you. So the next question we have after that one is, the uniform email sent out last Friday has all the characteristics of a phishing attack. How are we coaching the university functions for all staff requests?
You want to take that? Yeah.
Yes, very good question. As far as the details of that specific email, I'm not too sure. But in regards to coaching staff across faculties and divisions, there's an ongoing awareness campaign that we commenced July this year. It is very new, and we are hitting division by division, faculty by faculty who are deemed high risk. Is it perfect? No, it's not, hence why we're doing a bit of a test and learn. As far as setting up processes and working with partnering with the different divisions and faculties in regards to like sending out official communications, there are processes behind the scenes that, again, we can definitely improve on, and that's part of the ongoing campaign, not just the awareness campaign, but the things that the cyber team are doing behind the scenes.
Thank you. So next on the agenda we have, with the cloud-first strategy, is there a preference or are we moving to a hybrid cloud?
Is there a preference or are we moving to hybrid cloud? So the reality is cloud is an open market, and my sort of view about cloud is you need some competitive tension between the players you have in your cloud environment. So very few organisations go all Microsoft or all all AWS. So the first thing is my view is we need to be able to support all those cloud platforms. You know, what we know is, say, Google's good at some stuff, AWS is good at some stuff, Azure is good at some other stuff. So I suspect we'll have all three of those partners in our mix, and then I suspect as we go, you know, as we start acquiring software as a service models, we'll have more cloud providers as well. So the reality is we're just going to have lots and lots of cloud providers. Some of them will be providing infrastructure or workload services, but over time, that requirement is likely to wane as more and more of our applications move to being software as a service models. So yes, we don't have a strong preference, but we'll be selected on the ability of that cloud provider to meet our needs, and we're not going to go to a monolithic, one-size-fits-all type relationship with cloud providers.
Next we have, when do staff get to know what the new organisation structure looks like? There was a domain model town hall meeting, but it was cancelled.
Yeah, so I think, let's just talk a little bit about what's happening here. So really what we're doing in this change is we are, apart from the VR work that we need to do for the to meet the budget requirements, most of this change is just a move of reporting lines. So there are some new roles some new roles that were created last year that now get absorbed into the structure. So there is a timetable to walk the leadership team through this change on Wednesday. Okay, and then once we walk the leadership team through, we'll have a timetable to present that out to the teams as well. But our goal is to do that as soon as we can, okay? And that would be sometime in the next couple of weeks. Okay.
Thank you. I think we have another question that follows along the same lines we just got rid of. So, who has given feedback that is in the right way to shape the new IT organisation when none of it has been socialised internally yet to the IT teams?
So we consulted, in creating that strategy, we did two things. We consulted widely with the business about the sorts of challenges they had engaging with the IT team. As you know, we used a boutique consultancy to help us work on the strategy. And we also, as you'll see, for those of you in the leadership team will see tomorrow, we've also consulted with external advisory organisations like Gartner. So that consultation has been broad, okay? We did get some feedback from internal staff members as part of the strategic planning process, not everyone, because it's impossible to do that. And it's interesting to see that the feedback we got internally was very similar to the feedback we got from our customers as well. So I feel there's a triangulation. When you're creating a strategy, you can't ask everyone, as you never get anything completed. But we have sampled staff members internally, and we have sought, we've used a boutique consultancy, and we have sought some input into Gartner to verify what we're doing at the moment.
Okay. Next we have, what can we do to listen to the broader voice of students and staff? Clearly understand their needs, implementees and requirements whilst being transparent to them.
So that really is the key with the domain model. So the first thing is we need to have a relationship. Actually, step back from that. So the first thing we need to have is a strategy, which says, well, these are all the things that we think we should be doing. And by having a strategy and talking about the priorities and talking about the way we need to work, that gives the divisions, the faculties and the divisions a sense of actually, well, an ability, to set their priorities. And that's the process we've been going through for the last few months. But that's great. A strategy is sort of a document. It gets delivered. We need to continue to update and maintain that strategy, and that's a big focus certainly of the S&A team going forward, in conjunction with everybody else in the IT organisation. But we've also got to build those relationships. So that's what the domain model's about. It's about saying, okay, I now have carriage. The STARS team now has carriage to deliver those changes for student, academic and research. There's a relationship between those groups, and there's a connection between those key functions, and we continue to evolve that over a period of time. So the domain model is there to enhance and deliver on those services. So we think that's the mechanism that will allow us to keep aligned and be transparent. And I think that's one of the key things we got feedback on doing. So I think we've probably only got time. We've got the door, lots of doors are opening, so I suspect we've got time for the last one.
So this will be the last one then, Tim. So UNSW IT aren't considered trusted partners, but roadblocks to changes by the faculties. The faculties are developing their own ideas without input from UNSW IT.
I'm not sure how I really respond to that. Is there a question there? No? So the reality is, there isn't a lot of trust there, but it's getting better. And if we talk to the faculties about how they feel about the engagement we've had around the strategy and the planning for next year, they're actually saying it's an improvement over last year. Okay, and it's getting better. I think we're about to be kicked out of here now. We will answer all these questions, but they won't be answered today, because I don't know how many there are and how long it's going to take us. But we will get something back over the next few days. Okay? Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
No problem.
How are you going? Right, you're Phil, acting Phil at the moment?
I'm acting Phil, so I'm filling in for Phil.
Congratulations. Congratulations, just don't get dodgy back.
Don't worry, I'll try not to. I'm going to make sure I don't lift up anything too heavy here. I mean, there's a lot of weight to
Have you heard from him at all or not?
I've heard that the surgery was successful. I haven't heard from him directly, but I've heard it from second-hand sources.
Okay.
So,
Oh, you can have the mic. Yes, sorry. Apologies. Yeah, let me unhook that from here.
lapel mics, the most dangerous equipment.
Yeah. That's right. Or heads of state even. Yeah.
Surprising what a mic can do. Where would you like this one, the hideaway?
In the slightly longer bag. There's 2 bags.
All right. I'll put in the slightly longer pencil case. Reminds me of high school, though. It works surprisingly well.
I'll just steal my laptop.
See, mate? No problem. So just so you know about the Facebook stuff, there's a focused assistant, so you can turn it off and it'll turn off those alerts.
We tried to turn it, yeah, because it's just, like, I guess with this, it's just awkward not having. Yeah, of course.
USB?
Sorry, yes.
That's all right, just making sure.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, guys. So today we'll be continuing the cost estimation. Today we will see how to, sorry. All right, thank you. So we'll be continuing with the cost estimation. Today we'll see how to estimate the cost of a labor, how to estimate the cost of the equipment, how to estimate the cost of pile foundation, which includes the load foundation and the sheeting foundation. All right, so if you have any questions, go to Slido. 3101 is the code. Announcements. So most likely, I will try to give back your in-class quiz to copy by this Friday. Online quiz 4, it will happen, it will start on 22nd November, which is this Friday, from 12 p.m. And the deadline, please note the deadline is Sunday, 24th November, 12 a.m. or 11:55 p.m. So make sure, so you have 3 days to complete your online quiz 4. The online quiz 4 will have questions from economic appraisal, from scheduling, and also from what we have done in the last 2 weeks. So it's a good chance for you to prepare for your final exam. Okay, consultation. So as you know that there is a consultation every week on Tuesday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. by the PTA in room Studio 5, Design Studio 501 in the civil building. So now the final exam is in less than 2 weeks' time. So I would recommend all of you to make use of this timing. So please visit Aziz. He's a PTA. He sits in Design Studio between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. So if you have any questions regarding this course, you can go tomorrow or next week. This Thursday, there will be demonstration. However, there are only 2 questions in the demonstration. So the first hour will be used for the demonstration question, while the next hour will be used for the consultation. So if you have any question regarding tutorial, regarding any lecture materials that you would like to ask your demonstrators, make use of this timing. And we will also have some consultation session by me. I will announce that on Moodle. All right, so in week 9, what we have done is the conceptual cost estimate and also the earthwork estimate, how to estimate the cost of the earthwork. Can you guys hear me at the back? Okay. So as I mentioned, today we'll find out how to estimate the cost of the labor. Now, labor is the most important part, or is the most important workforce in any construction or in any project. So the cost of labor, it includes not only the labor cost by itself, but also many other costs. So it is assumed that the labor will work for 8 hours a day and 5 days a week. So if the labor is working for more than 8 hours a day, that's considered as overtime. And if the labor is working for more than 5 days a week, that's considered an overtime. So the overtime pay for the labor is about 1.5 to 2 times the original payment or the normal wage. There is a compensation insurance, there is a social security tax, there is an unemployment compensation tax, there is a liability and property damage insurance, and then there are fringe benefits. So any company who are hiring any labor has to pay all these taxes. So if you calculate the total cost of labor to the company, so the total cost of labor to the company, it includes the labor cost, it includes the compensation insurance, the social security tax, and all other parameters that I mentioned below. The fringe benefits, so if the labor is working with any not-for-profit organizations, with any government organization, they get some fringe benefit. So these fringe benefits, they are basically non-taxable. Now, there are different types of wages. So generally, the wage of a labor is calculated per hour. So there is a union wage. So if the labor is a part of a union, so there are different unions for different construction field. So if the labor is a part of any union. The union can negotiate with the contractor or with the employer, and they can find out the minimum wage that will be paid to the labor. So this is called a union wage. So the construction workers who are members of the labor union, the wage rate established by a labor contract between the union and the construction contractors management, and the union wage rates usually includes fringe benefit. So what happens? This wage, if the labor is a part of a union, they get many other benefit in addition to the normal labor cost. They can also get the fringe benefit because the union, they are the most powerful, what should I say? They are the most powerful organization of any industry. So they have the power to negotiate with the client, with the contractor, to make the wage appealing to the labor. So this is why the laborers, they are generally the part of a union, and these are the benefits that they are being paid if they are the part of the union. Then there is an open shop wage. So if the labor is not a part of any union, he can work with any contractors, but he will have to negotiate the wage by himself. So the union won't help him because he's not a part of the union. So the construction workers who are not members of a union, the open wage agreed by each individual employee and the employer. So obviously this wage has to be greater than the minimum wage in Australia. The prevailing wage, so if the labor is working with any state government or in any federal government projects or any council projects, they are being paid prevailing wage. So the workers who are employed on projects funded by the state or federal money, the wage rate established by the prevailing wage at the project location. So the government, they have fixed certain wage for the labor depending on the geographical location. So there are some wages fixed for the labor. So if the labor is working in Sydney, there are some fixed rate, which is known as the prevailing wage. If the labor is working in some regional area, there are some fixed wage, which is again the prevailing wage fixed by the state government or the federal government. So the federal government and many states have government established wage for each construction craft for each geographical location. So depending on what sort of labor it is, so there are different rates depending on different location and depending on different construction craft. Okay, let's see the example. An iron worker works 10 hours per day, 6 days a week. So he's working 10 hours per day and 6 days a week. As I mentioned, anything above 8 hours is considered as overtime, and anything greater than 5 days is considered as overtime. So a base wage of AUD 20.97 per hour is paid for all straight time work. So this is a normal wage that is paid to the labor. 8 hours per day, 5 days a week. An overtime rate of time and 1/2 is paid for all hours over 8 hours per day, Monday through Friday, and double time for Saturday work. So this means that if the worker is working overtime on weekdays, so when I say overtime, if the worker is working beyond 8 hours a day, then they are being paid 1.5 times the normal wage. And if the worker is working on weekend or on Saturday, the amount is double the, okay, so the amount is double the time. So if the worker is working on Saturday, they are being paid 20.97 times 2 for 1 hour of work. The social security tax is 7.65%, and the unemployment tax is 3% of actual wages. So this is 7.65 and 3% of actual wages. So this word is very important, actual wage. What is an actual wage? We'll come to see. The rate for workmen's compensation insurance is $12.5 per 100 of base wage. So when I say base wage, so base wage is a normal wage, which is 20.97 per hour. So the base wage is the normal wage, which is 20.97 per hour in this question. And the actual wage, we will see what is the actual wage. And the public liability and property damage insurance rate is 3.25 Australian dollar per $100 of base wage. The fringe benefits are $3.15 per hour. Calculate the average hourly cost of the iron worker. So all the information it's given, different, what is the wage rate, what is the different types of compensation we will have to pay, and what we need to calculate, we need to calculate the average hourly cost of the iron worker. Let's see the solution. Okay, so he's working 10 hours per day and 6 days a week. So the actual work hours is 10 times 6, which is 60. Okay? Now, for 8 hours per day, he is being paid the base wage. For 2 hours, additional 2 hours, or the overtime 2 hours per day, he is being paid 1.5 times the wage. And for 10 hours on Saturday, he is being paid 2 times the normal wage or the base wage. So the pay hours would be equal to 5 times 8. Why 5 times 8? Because 8 hours is the base wage. And 5 plus 5 times 2 into 1.5. So 2 hours every day he is doing overtime, and the wage that you are paying is 1.5 times the base wage. Plus 10 times 2. So 10 is the number of hours he is working on weekend, on Saturday, and you are paying twice the base wage. So that's why it's multiplied by 2. So the effective number of hours that you are paying to the labor, or the pay hours, is 75. So 5 times 8, because it's the norm, is the base wage. For 8 hours every day, the worker is being paid the base wage. For 2, the worker is doing overtime 2 hours every single day for 5 days. So 5 times 2, and he's been paid 1.5 times the base wage. So you multiply by 1.5. Plus, he's working 10 hours on weekend, on Saturday, and he's been paid 2 times the base wage. So you multiply 10 by 2. So the effective number of hours that you are paying to the labor is 75 hours. The actual hourly pay, so if I calculate the total payment that you make to the labor, it would be 75 times 20.97 Australian dollar, because this is a base wage. So the total payment that you are making to the labor is 20.97 times 75. So this is the total payment. Now, if I calculate the actual hourly pay, it would be the total payment, which is 20.97 times 75, divided by the number of hours the labor actually worked. So the labor worked for 60 hours. So the actual hourly pay will be equal to the total payment that you made to the labor divided by the actual number of hours the labor actually worked, or the number of hours the labor actually worked. So this gives you $26.2 per hour, which is expected. It would be higher than the base wage. Now the Social Security tax is 7.65% of the actual wage. So if I want to calculate the Social Security tax per hour, it would be, okay, so the Social Security tax is 7.65 times the actual wage. So this is 7.65 times 100 times the actual wage, which is 26.213. So this wage, which comes out to be $2, is the Social Security tax per hour. And then you have the unemployment tax, which is 3% of the actual wage. So this value is basically 3% of the actual wage, which is 26.213. The workers' compensation insurance is 12.5 over 100 of base wage. So it's 12.5% of the base wage, not the actual wage. So the workers' compensation insurance, this will be 12.5 over 100 times the base wage is 20.97. Similarly, The public liability and property damage insurance is 3.25% per base wage. So again, this would be 3.25% of base wage, 20.97. And then the fringe benefit is 3.15 per hour. So the fringe benefit remains as this because we are calculating the hourly rate of the labor. So the average hourly rate will be the addition of the actual hourly pay plus all these values. So this gives you $35 around 5 cents, 50 cents. So this is how you calculate the average hourly cost of the labor. So there are two costs. One is the base wage, and another is the actual wage. The actual wage is calculated after accounting for all the overtime that the worker has done. Any questions? Okay. The equipment cost. Now, we have seen during the economic appraisal that there are various equipment costs which is inculcated by the company if the company purchases the equipment. Now, it's on the company. So the company can decide if the company really wants to purchase some equipment or whether the company wants to rent an equipment. Now, we have seen certain examples during the economic appraisal time, so probably in week 2 or week 3, that there were an example of the mailbox where the company decided to rent an equipment rather than purchasing it. Because if the company decides to purchase it, then the profitability reduces. So the equipment, the construction equipment can be purchased or rented. The equipment is purchased when extensive use is required. So if the company doesn't need the equipment after certain time, maybe after 1 or 2 use, the company can decide to rent the equipment rather than purchasing it. So the equipment is rented if it is used sparingly. The cost of the equipment, the cost of owning. So there are different costs of owning the equipment. So there you need an initial investment. So we have seen during depreciation in week 3 that you need an initial capital investment when you want to purchase any equipment. And then there is a depreciation cost of the equipment over its useful life. Then there are taxes, there are insurance, and then there is a storage when not in use. So these are the costs of owning the equipment. So if the company decides to own the equipment, they will have to consider all these costs which are related to the equipment. Then there are other costs, which are the operating cost. Now we have seen when we drew the cash flow diagram, there are different operating costs each year. So similarly, there are operating costs for the equipment. And those operating costs can be the cost of fuel, the cost of lubricating oil, and the cost of maintenance and repair. So these are different operating costs for the equipment. Now today, we'll only discuss the cost of fuel. So the fuel may be gasoline or diesel. The most machines normally operate for 45 minutes in an hour. So this is a standard. So it is assumed that the efficiency of the machine is 75%. So they work only 45 minutes per hour. And the machine is not operated at its full capacity all the time, only during heavy load condition. So if a machine is rated, say, 100 kilowatt, the machine may not operate to its full condition all the time. Suppose if the cycle time is 1 hour, the machine may operate to its full condition maybe only for 15 minutes. It depends on the load conditions. So the machine does not operate to its maximum load condition, to its maximum rated power all the time. And this you will have to account for when you calculate the fuel cost. The fuel consumption under normal temperature and pressure. So if it's a gasoline engine, the fuel cost is, the consumption of fuel is 0.22 liter of fuel for each actual power developed. So if 1 kilowatt of power is consumed or developed, then you will need 0.22 liter of gasoline. If it's a diesel engine, if for 1 kilowatt power, you will need 0.15 liter of fuel. So this is in general. Now, if you get any question in the exam or in the quiz or anything like that, this will be given, because this is general and this varies. The operating factor when an engine at its full power only for a fraction of operation cycle. So what is an operating factor of an engine? So the operating factor is equal to engine factor times the time factor. Now, what is an engine factor? The engine factor takes into account that the machine is not operated to its full capacity all the time. So the machine is operated only to its full capacity for a certain time, but not during the complete time of its cycle. So this is what the engine factor is. And the time factor, it takes into account the efficiency of the machine. So if the machine works 45 minutes per hour, the time factor would be 45 over 60. So this is how you calculate the time factor. And the operating factor of the machine is engine factor times the time factor. Okay, let's see this example, and it will be clear how to calculate the operating factor and how to calculate the volume of the fuel consumed. A shovel is used in a digging operation. Its rated power, so the operating cycle is 20 seconds. So that's the operating cycle. The engine is operated at full power while filling the bucket in tough ground, requiring 5 seconds. So out of 20 seconds of operating cycle, for 5 seconds, the engine worked to its full capacity. During the balance of the cycle, which is 15 seconds, the engine is operated at 50% of its rated power. So during 15 seconds in one cycle, the engine is operated at 60 kilowatt, which is 50% of its rated power. And the shovel is operated only for 45 minutes in an hour. So this gives you the time factor, 45 minutes in an hour. Calculate the diesel required per hour. So how much diesel we need in an hour, or the machine need in an hour. Now, if you consider that the machine needs 0.15 liter of fuel for each kilowatt developed. Okay, so if we assume this value, the diesel required, or the volume of diesel, can be given as operating factor times the rated power times 0.15 liter, which will be given to you. So this is how you can calculate the volume of the fuel that is needed in an engine. So the volume of fuel will be equal to the operating factor times the rated power times the volume, which is used per kilowatt. So let's see. Engine factor. Now, the engine is worked to its full capacity only for 5 seconds. And the cycle time is 20 seconds. So for filling the bucket, the factor would be 5 over 20, which is 0.25. For the rest of the cycle, the engine worked, the capacity of the engine was 50% to its original capacity. So it would be 15 seconds, because for 15 seconds, the engine worked with 50% of its capacity. So 15 over 20 times 50%. This 50% is because the engine worked only up to 50% of its capacity. So this gives you 0.375. So the engine factor would be 0.625, which is the addition of 0.25 and 0.375. Now suppose if the engine worked to its full capacity throughout the duration of its cycle, then the engine factor would be 0.25 plus 0.75, which will be equal to 1, right? So that was simpler. Now, if the engine works 50% to its capacity for 15 seconds in 20-second cycle, then this is how you calculate the engine factor for that 15-second duration. So the total engine factor would be the addition of these two values, 0.625. The time factor, as I mentioned, the engine worked for 45 minutes in 1 hour, so the time factor would be 45 over 60, which is 0.75. The operating factor is engine factor times the time factor. So you multiply 0.625 times 0.75, and this is what you get, the operating factor. And as I mentioned before, the volume of fuel is equal to the operating factor times the rated power times the 0.15, which is the volume, the liter of fuel used per kilowatt. So the operating factor is 0.47. The rated power is 120. And 0.15 is the liter of diesel used per kilowatt. Now, if I say it's not diesel, if I say it's gasoline, so you will use 0.22 liter of fuel per kilowatt. So in place of 0.15, you will use 0.22 if it's gasoline. If in the question, if it's mentioned something else, if it's mentioned some other value, just use that value. So the operating factor is equal to the time factor times the engine factor. The engine factor takes into account what's the capacity of the, how much engine work, or what was the capacity of the engine when it's worked, when it completed the work. So if the engine worked to its full capacity throughout the duration of the project, then the engine factor would be 1. If the engine worked only up to 50% of its capacity throughout the duration of the project, the engine factor would be 0.5. If the engine worked for some time to its full capacity and the remaining time to 50% of its capacity, then you will have certain value of the engine factor, which we have calculated in this question. So this is how you can calculate the total fuel consumption. And if someone asks you what is the cost of the total fuel consumption, then you will just multiply in the question. So this is how. All right, let's come to the building foundation estimating. So how to estimate the cost for building foundation? Now the classification of piles. The piles can be classified into two. The earth. For example, the load-bearing pile is very simple. For any buildings, you need the load-bearing pile. So the building is supported by the foundation, which is the load pipeline, and you are so this is the reason you put a piling sheet at the half of this lecture. In this lecture, we will study only the timber pile. We'll study only the steel piles. So the steel piles used for drive piles through considerable depth of poor soil to reach solid rock or another formation having high load-bearing properties. Okay, you all are civil engineer. Can anyone answer me? When do you use shallow foundation and when do you use pile foundation? Sorry? So sometimes you use shallow foundation and sometimes you use pile foundation. Now, what are the parameters that you will consider when using the pile foundation? Anyone? Any answer? Have you done geotechnical engineering? Not yet. Have you done soil? You have done soil, right? Or you are doing soil. Okay. So when the bearing capacity of the soil is not very high, when the soil is loose, suppose you have excavated the site for laying the foundation, you laid the foundation, but if the soil is loose, if the soil is not strong enough, if the bearing capacity of the soil is not high enough, okay, then what will happen? There may be some differential settlement, there may be some settlement, okay, and the piles, the shallow foundation won't be able to take the load of the structure. So when do you use the pile foundation? So the pile it's quite long, right? So generally it's 40 meters, 40 feet, 20 meters, so that long is the pile foundation. So you want to develop the total bearing capacity of the soil in such a manner that it can carry the load which is getting transferred to the soil via the piles, via the building. So this is where you will use a pile foundation. So when the soil is loose enough, does not have the enough bearing capacity to support the load which is coming from the structure. So in those particular cases, you use a pile foundation. So it's used for dry piles to considerable depth of poor soil to rich solid rocks or another formation having high load-bearing properties. A cap can be installed on the top of piles to reduce the potential for damage during the driving operation. So when you have a pile, you install the cap at the top so that the pile itself is not damaged when you are pushing the piles in the ground. So this table, it shows the approximate number of piles that could be driven to full power. So if the length of the pile is, say, 40 feet, so if the length of the pile is 40 feet, if the weight of the pile is, say, 100 pound per feet,